Welcome to the AT Parenting Survival Podcast, where you get help and guidance through the chaos of parenting a child with anxiety or OCD. This show is for educational purposes and is not intended to replace the guidance of a qualified professional. Here's your host, child therapist, Natasha Daniels.
Well, hello there, and welcome to another episode of the AT Parenting Survival Podcast. Today we're going to be talking to Stuart Ralph from the OCD Stories. I had a great conversation with him. We talk about OCD therapy for kids and teens, what that looks like, how it looks different than when we're treating adults, things that parents can look for in therapy. We talk about his journey from having a successful podcast, the OCD Stories, and I think learning so much interviewing all these experts and researchers and people with lived experience with anxiety and OCD, and then getting his degree and creating his own practice, and that journey of going from his own struggles with OCD. We actually didn't even touch on that in this episode, which we should have. His own struggles, should have brought that up. And then his evolution into learning and being an advocate and a platform for people with OCD and therapists who treat OCD, and then moving into that professional realm of practicing, and then creating his own rather large practice, treating children and teens and young adults with anxiety, OCD, and other issues as well. And we touch on the struggles in particular that people in the UK experience, and he offered some really helpful tips that I was not aware of as far as how to navigate those systems. And we talk about his practice and how you can access his practice and get some really great quality care. Interestingly, his practice can treat anyone globally, which I am thrilled to find out, because that's going to be a go-to resource. So if you are listening to this and you have struggled to find an OCD therapist, and you're either in a location that doesn't have expertise, which is a lot of us, you're in a country where you can't tap into care, whether you're in America, the UK, Canada, Australia, or any other corner of the world, you can go to his practice and they are able to do virtual therapy, which is fantastic. So his website, his practice website, is integrativecenterforocd.co.uk. Integrative Center, spelled the British way, CENTRE, for OCD.co.uk. I'll leave a link in the show notes, but I did want to mention his practice going into this, because I know there are so many of you listening who are in areas where you have not been able to find that OCD expertise. My kids are actually doing virtual therapy with someone who has expertise in a different state, because I wanted my kids to be treated by the best and someone who's really well skilled at dealing with the type of issues that my kids are struggling with. So virtual therapy is fantastic. It's more important, in my opinion, to find people who are skilled than worrying about in person, because, OCD pediatric therapists are literally unicorns. Speaking of which, I also want to thank NoCD for sponsoring this episode. And NoCD is offering affordable, effective, convenient therapy, and really filling in that gap as well. And they're available in the US and outside of the US. So you can check out all these options. Schedule your free 15-minute consultation to see if NoCD is the right fit for you and your child. Just go to treatmyocd.com. That's treatmyocd.com. I'll leave a link in the show notes as well. So we're trying to get you covered in all realms. The more resources and referrals you have to places that could potentially provide your kids with that clinical support, the better. So try these out and get some support for your kids. I also want to mention that we are, I think, a week out that my memoir was released last week. I have to look at my calendar because I am batching these episodes, and so I never know when they're actually coming out. But it came out last week. If you love reading memoirs, if you like reading mental health memoirs, if you are struggling with social anxiety, or if your child is struggling with social anxiety, or you just like a feel-good book, then check out my memoir. It's called Out of My Shell, overcoming social anxiety from childhood to adulthood. I walk you through my own story, and my hope is also that I empower other people to have their own stories of overcoming struggles, falling in love with themselves, finding self-compassion. It really should hopefully be a universal book for anybody who likes to read memoirs. So you can check that out on Amazon or Barnes & Noble, wherever books are sold. You can also go to my website where there are links to it at socialanxietyreality.com. Follow me on Instagram for an up-close and personal view of my social anxiety at socialanxietyreality. All right, well, without further ado, let's jump into my conversation with Stuart. Well, I want to welcome Stuart Ralph from OCD Stories and more. We'll talk about that in a second. Thanks for coming onto the podcast.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's good to see you again. And I have been on this podcast before, haven't I?
I was thinking about that, and I was like, I think
I have. Oh, haven't I?
I don't think you have. I don't know. I'll have to go check. I know I've been on
Yeah.
yours, but I don't think you've been on here.
Okay. Well, I feel like I have, so it's good to be back.
Yes, I feel like you have too. So welcome back.
Thank you.
Let's first start with how pretty much everybody knows you to begin with. Your fantastic podcast, OCD Stories. Maybe you can tell people who maybe haven't been on this planet and don't know about your podcast what that's about first.
Yeah, thank you. So yeah, the OCD Stories is a weekly podcast where I interview, originally it was just professionals I interviewed. And then after about a year, I started interviewing people with an OCD story or parents of someone or a loved one with someone with OCD. So now it's a mixture between story-based episodes and professionals where I maybe interview them about a particular therapy or a particular aspect of a therapy. And yeah, it originally started because it started when I was at the beginning of my own kind of recovery journey about 9 years ago. And I was really stuck and felt quite low and was suffering. And my thought was, well, if I'm going to suffer, then people may as well benefit from my suffering. And I'd done a podcast previously from a past career. So I had the kind of skills. So I just thought I'd do an OCD podcast. Started it, and yeah, it's gone really well, and lots of people listen, which is nice. I still enjoy doing it.
It's fantastic. I was looking to see if you're still doing it regularly now that
every
you
Sunday.
have your private practice every Sunday still. Is that a lot to juggle now that you've got practice?
Yeah, it is. It is. How long I can keep going, I'm not sure, but I'm doing my best. I think as you would have found this, right, as the years go on, you find not shortcuts, but you trim the fat of like, there's so much stuff we probably did in the early days that just wasn't needed. Like I cut way back on social media. It doesn't really do much to grow the podcast, for me at least.
Yeah.
But it takes up so much time. Whereas now it's very much about getting the guests, recording it, editing it, putting it live. So I've reduced the time so much that I can fit it in here or there. And there is the odd evening I'm editing it or something, or whatever. But I enjoy it, and I know it resonates. So that's what kind of keeps me going.
Yeah, and I think the fact that you enjoy it. I know with my podcast too. I feel like I love talking. So like this doesn't seem like heavy lifting.
No.
There's other things that I do that seem really heavy. But this isn't one of them. And I think you're right too. Like you develop processes as you get older where you're like, I just need to, especially when now you have a daughter too. It's like you get in, you get out, you get it done, so that is good. I was thinking even before, you have your own practice, which we'll talk about, but I was thinking like, you have so much expertise because you have literally interviewed anybody and everybody related to OCD. Like fantastic researchers, people like who are big names in the field, people with their personal stories. I think one time I heard you say like you feel like you've already had like a graduate program, based on your interviews. I don't know how you phrased it.
Yeah, maybe in the early days. I've since done a graduate program in counseling and psychotherapy, but yeah, I mean, the amount of hours spent on it, it's as much as a PhD probably. Not to take away anyone who's done a PhD, because that is a whole level of work. But yeah, it's been a great education.
Yeah. Well, and I think just listening to people's lived stories and
Hmm.
hearing how that, it's really impacting people in the real world. That is, I think that is such a powerful supplement. But I'd be interested to hear how it translated after you did your program and then you started your practice and you started working with kids, which I thought was very exciting
Hmm.
because we really need, especially in the UK, some some great resources to refer people to. And we'll talk about
Yeah.
the UK in general and specifically the barrier to resources in a little while. But I'm curious on a personal level, like what that transition was for you. Because I feel like you probably went into it with so much more knowledge than I would have, like starting out.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely took my time training because I kind of did a kind of conversion course prior to conversion being in psychology because I didn't have a psychology undergrad. So I needed to do kind of a year conversion course in psychology or mental health psychological therapy specifically. That's the one I did. You don't have to do that. Um, and so, yeah, I mean, yeah, going into it definitely helped me. Specifically when I work with kids with OCD and anxiety, I've already got a lot of the information, but I had to learn how to apply it. So although I maybe had it in my head, a lot of it, the kind of mechanical hands-on side of it, I was still very much a beginner, and I still am. I'm still learning that, and doing my best to take this applied knowledge. And sometimes it's a bit of a curse because where I've spoken to all these different people, my head's really muddled about what to do in session because I'm pulled in four different directions that I could go, and then sometimes that can become quite what holds me back. But that's yeah. But it's been really good. It's been great to have that foundation. It's definitely given me a level of confidence going in. Um, I've been qualified now for a few years, and it's yeah. I think I'm slowly settling in to who I am as a clinician.
Yeah, and I feel like it takes a while to get your
Yeah,
beat because there's nothing more humbling than a kid who has no filter.
yeah,
You know,
yeah,
like they will let you. I think it's hard being a child and teen OCD therapist or anxiety therapist because they will let you know when you're not landing, and things are not going well in session. And so
yeah.
it took me a
I like
while,
that.
you know,
Yeah,
it took me a while
yeah.
to develop some thick skin and not,
Hmm.
feel beaten up in a session.
Yeah. Well, when kids are kind of lying to you, as in they don't get it, but they're saying they do. I find that more frustrating than when the kids are just brutally honest, like that doesn't make sense. They say something like that. And I'm like, yeah, you're right, it doesn't make sense. Let me try again.
That
And I
is
think that
true.
really helps me sharpen my approach and be more accurate in my words.
Yeah, that is true because you're not going to waste a lot of time because they are going to most kids will they don't know how to kind of mask their
Yeah.
either their lack of interest or their just distaste for you in general. So,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
but but also on the flip side, when they get it,
Yeah.
you can see it and you see that light bulb moment, and kids are really good at showing their excitement and their enthusiasm or their
Yeah.
hope. And so I think it works both ways. I don't remember which baby this was, but I get really sick when I'm pregnant and I'm like
Mm.
throwing up most of the time. And I remember just sitting there in session with this like 5-year-old or 6-year-old, and he's on the floor and I'm like in a chair and I'm just barely holding on. I'm just trying not to throw up in front of him.
Mm.
And I don't even know what he was saying, but all I remember, and this is probably like, I don't know, 15 years ago, but I remember him looking up and just being like, is there any other feeling teachers in this building? And I was like, I was getting fired. Like, then
Yeah.
that was a wake up call, like, okay, I'm not even here right now. But
Mm.
that's funny.
But that must have been incredibly hard for you to stay focused
Oh, yeah,
while
those were
wanting to throw up. Yeah.
worst sessions. Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. Luckily, that's never going to happen again.
Well, I've
So,
definitely one of my female colleagues, not to gross anyone out listening, especially if they've got emetophobia. But she told me once a story when she was heavily pregnant. She was mainly on Zoom at the time because it was around the time of COVID. And she just had to make some excuse like the postman had come or something with a package. So she switched her camera off and the audio and then threw up in a bucket, then switched the bin and then turned the camera back on.
Yeah, I remember
So
those
yeah,
days. Luckily I had a bathroom like right down the hall, and it was a pretty
okay,
private building. It was like just a little house. So yeah, those are rough times.
yeah.
Um, what do you think was your biggest surprise working with kids and teens?
The thing that's coming to me is just, it seems kind of obvious, but just how varied it is. I think when I originally began training, before I decided to go down the path to work with kids, I remember seeing this is what on my conversion course. At the time, I was always going to do OCD, but I was going to probably go down the adult route. And this psychologist came in, and I think there might have been two of them, and she was talking about working with kids. And my instant judgmental opinion was, oh, that's not really therapy or psychology. Almost like these kids don't have an inner world. That was kind of my default belief system at the time. And obviously, as I trained, and now that's completely wrong. They're little humans. That's it. They've got as big a inner world as any adult, maybe even more so sometimes. And just how varied those inner worlds are, and how much you have to be adjusting on the fly to each individual kid, especially maybe to their interests or something like that. Whereas with an adult, you wouldn't maybe do that as much, I guess. Tailored to the adult would just, okay, that this is the psychology, this is the psychoeducation, this is what we need to do, let's do it. With kids, you've got to be much more like weaving in and out, being more subtle, finding ways to get them on board. That's probably been the biggest surprise, yeah.
Yeah, that's why I think it takes so much extra skill. I'm
Mm.
biased, obviously, but I feel like it takes extra skill to work with kids and teens because you're right. I feel like that is like at the heart of it is
Mm.
that you can be a pure ERP therapist or you could be a pure ACT therapist. You can have your modality, but that's
Mm.
just not going to fly with a child. Like you have to be so, I'm trying to think of how the right word, but like to be able to be adaptable and
Yeah.
flexible and read the room and read the child
Mm.
and
Yeah.
hard to stay in that narrow lane because what works for one kid won't work for another child, and what
Mm.
motivation needs to happen for one kid won't work for the other one. And so it's a bigger
Yeah,
struggle, I think.
exactly. 100%, exactly that. And also you've got the brain changes that happen from, being very young through to teens, young adult. Their brain is changing and developing so much, whereas an adult, especially past 25, you're developing with a fairly developed brain or fully developed brain. Whereas pre 25, especially pre 18, who knows who you're going to get today and where their brain development is at. And so you're also changing your approach to the developmental stages of their brain. I'm not sure I always think about it in that context. I'm more just treating them as the individual, but that's also at play, right?
Yeah, and I almost think that happens on a almost subconscious level because
Mm.
you'll notice, or maybe you've noticed, like you'll have particular kids and you're having to almost perform. It's exhausting. I'm kind
Yeah.
of glad I'm not in private practice anymore. I just don't have it in me. It's just like it's physically exhausting.
Mm.
I'd see a parent session on my schedule and I'd be like, oh, okay, good. Like I'm just going to be able to relax because the younger they get, or if they have comorbid conditions like
Yeah.
ADHD, you have to really bring out the bells and whistles of engaging them and,
Mm.
playing games or real hands-on stuff, getting them out of their chair. And I think that you just start to meet the developmental needs of each child. The teenagers will sit there and it's stupid. They don't want to get out of their chair, depending on
Yeah.
where they're at. So that
Yeah.
adaptability is so key.
Yeah, that's what I noticed today. I had 5 clients today, and I went from like a 20-something-year-old, young 20s, fully just talking it all through, and then I had like a 10-year-old, and we're blowing bubbles, and like I'm fully out of my seat, and it just that constant change. That's what I like as well, going through the different age ranges throughout the day. I
Yeah.
really like, yeah,
Yeah. I think it's never boring. I think it's definitely
yeah.
never boring. What would you tell parents who have not had their kids be in OCD therapy as far as like what to expect or to look for?
Yeah, I mean, what to look for. So obviously, ERP is quote unquote the gold standard, and it's definitely a part of every time I work with a kid or teen or young adult. I also bring in acceptance commitment therapy So a lot of skills, especially sort of Russ Harris's version of it, like dropping anchor, urge surfing to sort of ride out the urge to do a compulsion. I will bring in compassion-based work, but I don't think that's needed or compulsory. I think it is for some people because they've got so much shame or they really don't like themselves, especially as they get older. You might see that, but definitely ERP is a bare minimum. You want to make sure that that's at least part of it, which I'm sure most of your listeners will be aware of ERP. Or
Yeah,
should I go?
definitely.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, and
Okay.
for
Okay.
those that aren't, for some reason, they just joined, it's exposure response prevention. And a therapist won't be doing it out of the gate. I love how you incorporate other things. I was listening to your episode where you were talking about you were being interviewed. I just listened to that the other day,
Oh, okay. Yeah.
and you were being interviewed about like you working with kids on your own podcast, and like your
Hmm.
practice and stuff and all the creative things that you're doing with kids. And I even like the sand work that you're bringing up. I felt like
Hmm.
that's not talked about a lot, but bringing those traditional like play therapy or play tools into ERP um, is is so effective. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, well, again, going back to like the brain changes, especially for really young children, I think one of the arguments against CBT is that it's too intellectual, too cognitive, and their brains aren't quite there yet. It's not to say they're stupid, their brains just don't work in that way. Now, you can, of course, do CBT with a very young age range, and I do that, but I integrate it with play-based elements, so my room is full of Minecraft like magnetic blocks, so you can basically do Minecraft in real life. Obviously, Play-Doh, art material, board games, card games, um, obviously sensory toys, all of that stuff. And then I have a whole wall full of sort of, we call them sand play symbols, but they're like miniatures, and two sand trays. And and the reason I like sand tray sand tray and sand play are technically two different therapies. I do the more sand play, but they're very similar. Um, it allows the kids, especially if they don't want to talk too much or if they're non-verbal, they can put these miniatures, these symbols in the sand, and then if they do talk, we can discuss it. And then the idea is for sand play, you don't even need to talk about it. The belief is something is working through in the background. And you see this sometimes with my sand play supervisor. I'll put, let's say we've done 7 trays with a kid, I'll put all those trays in a PowerPoint from start to end, and we'll look through them and you'll see a change. It will go from being like chaos, and by the end it'll be much more orderly, much more peaceful in the tray. There's much more of a narrative going on, so something is being worked through. And then you can integrate that with ERP. So if there's, it's not so much OCD, but let's take a spider phobia. I have spider symbols, miniatures, so they could put that in the sand and they're instantly facing spiders, but in a safe, contained way. They're little plastic spiders. Or with OCD, I'll do it. I'll say, do a tray on your OCD, and then we can talk about it. And okay, now grab some symbols that could support you within the tray, and then we talk about that. What are those supports in your life, and all of that stuff. So there's lots of ways to get creative with it. Or Play-Doh. Like I said on that podcast, I'll sometimes get them to make OCD out of Play-Doh so they can kind of see what it looks like. I get them to make themselves, and then a sort of supportive version of themselves. And then we can have sort of dialogues between these Play-Doh characters. What does the OCD tell you to do? How could this supportive self talk back to the OCD or support you in ignoring the OCD or doing something else? So just trying to get creative like that. But yeah, I definitely find, especially with the young kids, I have to make creative. They just look at me glazed over, pretending they're listening. They don't care.
Yeah.
It's like they're back in school,
Yeah.
So it's, yeah. So it's kind of, I kind of look at it, you're kind of Trojan horsing in the CBT principles within play.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's a really good way to put it. And a fantastic way to use sand play, I think, to incorporate anxiety or OCD struggles. And I'm like you, I started off as a traditional therapist and I did some sand play and sand tray work. I was kind of flexible in either one. And then when I moved into anxiety and OCD, I still saw its role. And I did see, I worked with a lot of like trauma and death and all sorts of stuff before that. And where they can't talk about it and you just would do a tray, and seeing that
Yeah.
progression, or even working with a 3 and 4 year old and
True.
who have seen like crazy stuff, and then just seeing
Yeah.
what they would do in the sand was like,
Yeah.
heart-wrenching and
Yeah.
therapeutic. But transitioning over to kids with anxiety and OCD, still a fantastic modality, I think, for a non-threatening way to explore anxiety and OCD, and even do some passive exposures where they don't even know they're really necessarily doing exposures, little toy
Yeah.
toilets or things that you're putting in the world. And I think that creativity is really helpful. I think sometimes parents think they get too much information, like the really educated parent around OCD, and they're like, it needs to be ERP, and there needs to be no toys in the room. And
Mm.
unfortunately that's what they get more often
Yeah.
than not. It's like an adult therapist that can teeter in kids. And so I think it's good for people to hear that one, play is a component, and it's a really
Yeah.
important component. And even if your child's not willing or able to do ERP, it sounds like there's so many places you're able to go with them before they do ERP.
Yeah, yeah, like I'm definitely not going to force someone to do ERP. So maybe we do more play, or even if it's a teen, we might not do more play. I mean, I do SAM play with teens, and I think as long as they're up for it, that can be really beneficial. But then I'll go much more sort of acceptance and commitment therapy heavy, and just working on those skills. And you can see progress with that alone. And then as they progress, they're more willing to then try ERP.
Yeah.
But sometimes, yeah, it just takes time. ERP is great, but you've got to want to do it. You've got to be ready.
Yeah. And there's so much, and I wish more therapists even understood that there's so much work that can be done without ERP, or to
Mm.
build them up. I think sometimes people just jump right into ERP, and then the child or teen is turned off. And then it's like, we already tried ERP, that didn't work. Now what? And you're like, well, maybe try it
Mm.
in a different way, or develop rapport with, I normally will say, find a therapist that practices ACT at least, so
Yeah.
that there's multiple therapeutic approaches going on, because there's always a place to start. If the child's willing to come into the office, that's what I always say. Like, if I have to go in the
Mm.
parking lot and drag them in, we're not really starting from like a level playing field, So
Yeah.
we might not be able to work together just yet. Maybe I'll just have to meet with the parent. But if they're willing to walk in voluntarily to my office, I feel like
Mm.
we're gonna do something, and it sounds like
Yeah.
you have that approach as well.
100%, 100%. I mean, one client, very young client comes to mind. She was very hesitant to come up the stairs, but that wasn't so much not wanting to do the therapy. That was worried about fires and being trapped in a building, and so that's okay. I will come down and get them up for that point. But yeah, you're right. If they're like, I don't want to be here, then definitely don't want to be forcing them, because
Yeah,
it's a negative experience of therapy then, and they may never want to come back.
exactly. Then, and that's what I try to tell parents. It's like, then you're tainting it for any future opportunity for them to get mental health. I
Mm.
remember the one time this woman dropped her 15-year-old off at my office, and she like literally sped out of my office. I could hear the tires screeching because my window is right in
Mm.
front of the parking lot. And I was like, what is going on? And he comes in and he's so angry and aggressive. He's like kind of aggressive in my office about being there. And I was like, get your mom on the phone. Like, where is she? Why did she leave you here? Ironically, at the end, I said,
Mm.
I won't see you. Like, I'm not going to force you to do. That's just not how I
Yeah.
work. Your mom might force you and she might bring you to someone else. I can't control that. But definitely, you're not going to work with me if you're feeling like that. A few weeks later, I got a call from her saying, he will only work with you. I don't know what you said to him, but it's that whole thing of,
Yeah. They want to
don't
be
force them.
respected.
Yeah.
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 Teens especially.
Oh gosh, especially. So I wonder, as far as the parent goes, there's like two questions. Maybe I should break it down, but
Mm.
what kind of work do you do with the parent? And we'll just do a two-parter. How can the parent maximize therapy outside of the therapy office?
I'll do the maximize one first. So with a lot of parents, I will kind of send them an email after session or a text to say, oh, this is the home practice. Usually, obviously, as long as the kid has agreed for me to do that, which they pretty much always do. And then obviously I keep on at the parents to help them with the home practice. Obviously, teens don't always want their parents helping with that. But I think sometimes if the parents are aware, they can just gently nudge sometimes. If there is a kind of tough dynamic between the parent and child or parent and teen, I might say to the parent, don't nudge them too much, just let them do it, but this is what we've assigned. But when the parent and kid are acting as a team, I definitely think that works really well. So I think that, and then probably goes on to the next bit of how I work with parents, because this is how it can also maximize therapies. So I train in SPACE, supportive parenting for anxious childhood emotions. I always have to say it like that.
That's impressive that you remember. I try to I don't even remember. Yeah.
Yeah, I stumbled over it for a long time. So I trained that about 2.5 years ago now. And I really love it. I don't use it solely with everyone. SPACE was obviously designed, as you know, but for your listeners, for when kids wouldn't go to therapy. And the parents are like, well, what do we do? We're at sea here. And Ellie Leibowitz and co at the Yale developed SPACE as a way of helping the parents reduce accommodations. So where they play a role in the compulsions and increase support, so supportive statements. So with some families, I will do SPACE when the kid isn't coming, partly because I just feel really bad for them. And it's like they need the help, right? And they're willing to put in the work. And I've had some really good success with SPACE, some not good success with SPACE. I find when it's really worked, the parents are just all in and they're going to commit to each week we set an accommodation to reduce. They stick to it, even if their kid's like going nuts at them. Yeah. And it's hard, right? It's hard to be shouted at or, and you feel like a bad person or bad parent. But I have seen change. It doesn't cure their OCD, get rid of it, but it makes a big dent in it. Or can make a dent in it. And then also the parents are getting their lives back because they're just not accommodating as much. So even if the kid is still heavily in OCD, they have more freedom again, which is going to relax them more, which is ultimately going to help the kid, hopefully. But I take SPACE principles. If I'm not doing SPACE with them, when I speak with the parents, I'll obviously teach them about accommodation and how to reduce that and trying to get them to increase support and maybe not use sort of blaming statements or why are you still doing this, or which is natural. We're human, we all get annoyed and we all say stuff like that. But yeah, trying to have like a supportive statement or formula can ride that out. So we try and, even if we want to scream, we kind of deliver it in a different way.
It's time we put help directly in our kids' hands. Introducing Crushing OCD course for kids and teens.
It was way more helpful than all the other therapy we've ever done because we didn't really know what to do. So we weren't really doing it before. So the course helped to figure out what the exposures are and how to do them.
We're not in therapy and find it really hard to find an ERP trained therapist here. So we're currently with like the public health service, but again, they don't seem to be trained in ERP. It's filled that gap that we don't have that was desperately needed.
This was really well timed for us to use between therapists and to help us get off to a good start with this new practice.
It was easy to use. I was able to do it from my phone or also on the computer.
There's different ages, so there were younger kids, there were teenagers, and so that was really nice too, to have a variety of ages where it wasn't just geared towards younger kids or older kids. It was a nice variety.
It's helpful for our kids to hear it from this third party as opposed to just us saying it.
I really like the offense and defense method. I love working on poking at OCD while it's sleeping. It makes it a little bit easier to do and it's kind of fun. I'm planning on using it to work on my fear of holding or touching batteries and stuff like that.
So it was really helpful and I think a lot of other kids would like it. I thought that I was the only one who had worrying about the weather and stuff. And then there was somebody else on there who worried about the same thing, which was really helpful.
Seems less scary to work on stuff now that I've watched this class and I'm more interested to work on it.
I like trying to do more exposures still and before I wasn't, I just didn't want to do them.
I've worked on some of my bigger compulsions and been successful.
I realised that it was helpful to do the exposures. Before it was really, really hard. It's still hard, but it's helpful to know that I need to do them.
Before there would be a lot of battles about it, so it is definitely less loggerheads.
Really, really good course and super helpful.
Definitely would recommend this. It's really easy to follow. It's nice bite-sized videos. I really like the worksheets that go along with it, and I think it's really helpful.
To learn more about this course and register your child or teen, go to atparentingsurvivalschool.com. That's so needed, I think, for parents is that extra coaching, because it is hard. You start to pull back your accommodations involving anxiety and OCD, and it's not pretty. And to have a professional be able to navigate you through that and validate that, like, yep, this is what it's supposed to look like. And that can be really, really helpful.
Yeah, fully agreed. I think, yeah, so some parents I find are quite standoffish with OCD treatment. I don't mean that in a negative way. I think they just maybe trust me and they trust their kid to work through it. But quite often it is a family system that needs to be worked with as well. And obviously the kid could work really hard, but if they're coming back and the parents are unintentionally accommodating, which of course as parents we accommodate because we care, but in OCD it just doesn't work. It doesn't help. When we normally accommodate in life, that's really good for our kids. But when it comes to OCD and anxiety, as you know, it just makes it worse. Sometimes I will have parents in the room with me. So especially if the kid wants them, I'm okay with, I have about 30% of my caseload non-OCD. And I do that because I learn so much from them that I can bring to the OCD cases, because obviously people don't just have OCD. And also it keeps it fresh for me. So if I've got some other things I'm working with, I don't get bored of OCD. But with the OCD clients, yeah, I will occasionally have the parents in for pretty much all the sessions, because when they're there, I can then find out where they're accommodating, set kind of, okay, this week you're going to try and reduce this. The kids there, they can fully agree to it or not. So they're fully on board. And I find that works quite well as well sometimes. Obviously, if the parent isn't giving the kid space, teen space, then obviously I'll be like, okay, it just needs to be the kid in here. But most of the time, that's fine.
Yeah, I love that you do that. I love all your approaches. I'm so excited because the UK needs like a solid, good OCD child therapist. I agree. I mean, if I could have the parent with me in the session, the better, because you're killing two birds with one stone. They're hearing you train the child, they're hearing the compulsions, they're hearing the homework, and then they get their role to pull that back. And really I've had a handful of times where it went sideways, then I was like, okay, this parent can't be in here. That was the exception, not the norm, or like I would do an exposure and I could see the parent was like pale and about to pass out, and I'm like, oh my gosh, like I need to shift my focus, I've triggered their OCD. So there were a few times but the majority, it was so much more therapeutic. And then you have the teens who have sexually taboo, intrusive thoughts, and obviously don't want their parents there. But in an ideal world, if you can work with the parent and the child together in a session, because it's so skill-based, it can be so powerful. Yeah.
100%. Yeah. And then they can go home and practice together the skills.
Yeah.
Or if the kid is having a really tough time, the parents there, they know the skills, they can remind them and coach them through that, which, really helps, I think.
Yeah. Let's talk about UK in particular. In my community, it's a global community. And so it's predominantly US, UK, and Australia, I would say, are like the three main countries that I work with. We have people all over the world, like Japan and Egypt and places, but UK, very UK. Oh, and Canada. Did I say Canada? And I find the UK is one of the hardest ones to help people navigate, because the parents seem the most lost. Canada's not that great either. All right, Canada and Australia, they're all equally probably bad. But with the UK, they're getting bad advice. They'll work with, is it CAMS over there?
CAMS, yeah.
CAMS, okay. Never spoke it out loud.
Close.
And a lot of times they're told may not be OCD, or they're too young, they can't diagnose OCD. So they come not only uneducated, but have poor education about the issue. And then when you tell them this is what you need, or this is what you should be looking for, they're not being able to find it.
Yeah, it can definitely be a challenge. So first bit of advice for the UK is we have a very slowly growing private arena space. My centre, there's probably 2 others I trust, and then the rest I'm not so confident in, just because things I've heard. But NHS, so yeah, CAMS is the part of the National Health Service that's specifically aimed at 18s and under. I think they maybe sometimes at some places go up to 25, but usually 18 and over you go to adult services. So we have like the ISDF in America, we have OCD Action and we have OCD UK, two not-for-profits charities. Tons of good information on their websites. They also have, both of them have support lines, which you can call up and basically talk with them about, obviously free of charge call lines, to get advice on how to navigate the system. You know, if you're having trouble with the system, they can sometimes advise, even advocate for you. In some cases, they might write letters to help you try and get to that higher level of care within the NHS. So they're really good. And even though their support lines are closed, I think you can call, leave a message, and then they'll call you back. If you're anxious to speak on the phone, you can also email them. But obviously, try and force yourself, because that's an exposure. Obviously, social anxiety, a plug for your book there.
Yeah, right. I'm like, I would find that email.
Yeah, I would have 2 years ago. So definitely that's like was my go-to, because they're a wealth of knowledge. They help people navigate the system all the time. In terms of the NHS, there's a couple ways that I know of, at least, that you can refer to. You can go via your GP and obviously talk about it and ask to be referred, or you can go via your local, what they call IAPT. Is it IAPT? I don't know, does that work for kids? I'm going to say IAPT, but it might just be for adults. IAPT is Improving Access to Psychological Therapies. It was an initiative that came out in like 2008 or something, where they basically hired a ton of CBT therapists, and not just CBT therapists, they call them PWP, or they used to, psychological wellbeing practitioners, which are like entry-level CBT. They're not quite qualified, but they've done enough training they can do sort of what they call low-intensity CBT in here. And they can do some good work. So yeah, if you can go, each local county has an IAPT website and you can self-refer. So you fill out, and within a couple of weeks, they call you up to get more information. And then you go, I believe, in the kind of wait list. And the wait list can be, you know, it varies by county in the UK. It can be well over a year for some, which is a lot. And you might only get 12 sessions max. Usually if you have autism or something like that, they will give you more sessions sometimes. Then we have, they call it stepped care in the UK. I don't quite know what each step is, but the kind of final step in the UK is we have one inpatient facility, which I think it's one or two, it's not a lot. And then we have intensive sort of outpatient centers, specifically for OCD. We have like 4 of those or something. Again, I could be making these numbers up. It could be more, it could be less.
Oh, that's good
to know, around that though. Yeah, and again, on the charity websites, they break it down, especially OCD UK has a page on like residential and inpatient in the UK. Okay. One of them is called the Maudsley, which is the intensive outpatient, and they do some really good work, and they're very specialist. All the therapists there are wonderful, but you've usually got to have gone for a couple rounds of CBT to get to that. So again, this is all, where is it? Even on the charity websites. So I'm not sure if IAPT is for kids, but again, the charity websites will be able to say, but definitely adults can self-refer through these websites, but always your GP would be able to refer you on to CAMHS. Yeah, like you were saying, I've had many stories where people have gone to CAMHS or even the adult services, and they've got general counselling, which is nothing wrong with that, but for OCD, it's probably not going to help. And they've gone through a couple rounds of that before getting CBT. They get CBT, but they get CBT without ERP. And that's something to think about for the UK, actually. So especially in the NHS, maybe less so private, they'll talk about CBT, but it doesn't guarantee ERP. So you want to make sure when they say CBT, they say CBT with ERP. That's kind of how they word it. So loads of people have had CBT and it's just not included ERP, and it's like, and these are all qualified CBT therapists. So for them to not realize ERP is needed is pretty worrying, in my opinion. Yeah. So you've got to be really mindful. So the thing I forgot earlier was the NICE guidelines, which stands for something like National something of Clinical Excellence, I think. Anyway, NICE guidelines, and on OCD UK they've put the NICE guidelines. So NICE was kind of a subsidiary organization, I think, that the NHS created. So across disorders and diseases, I think both physical and mental, they wanted to look at the evidence base. So professionals can go to the NICE guidelines for that condition and be like, okay, this is what's needed for OCD in OCD's case. So yeah, so that says like CBT with ERP. I think it says like and medication, but medication's maybe optional or something like that. So it clearly says, and for like depression guidelines, it will have CBT. I think it also has some other more talk-based therapy, because they're just going off the data. So ACT isn't in the NICE guidelines yet. But the reason I share this is if you're going via the NHS and they're offering you counselling or CBT without ERP, you can take the NICE guidelines or quote them and say, well, actually the NICE guidelines say I need ERP. And then you're much more likely to get it, because it'd be hard for them to go against the NICE guidelines because it's their policy.
Yeah, that's really good to know. I think that happens a lot. I mean, I hear that in my community all the time, that they're seeing a CBT therapist and they're not getting the ERP. And I don't know how to, I send them to the different charities, but I don't know how to guide them to advocate for themselves. And that's a really helpful tool of like, pull up the NICE guidelines and just say, these are best practices. And I'm not getting that.
Yeah. Exactly. So I just Googled it. So if you Google, at least it might be different because Google shows everyone different things. But when I type in NICE guidelines OCD UK, the first link is actually nice.org.uk, which is, I guess, their actual website, and it's obsessive compulsive disorder. And then the second one is OCD UK. It's NICE guidelines for the treatment of OCD. So probably either of those you can take to the GP or CAMS or whoever and say, actually, this is what you say I need, so I want it.
Yeah, that's helpful. I'll link it in the show notes. I'll find it and link it. And so if people decide to go private and not get on that wait list and then have to advocate for ERP, can you talk about your practice? I'm assuming you're private.
Yeah.
That's how it all works. Yeah. So how does that process work? And if you can tell us a little bit about your practice, that'd be awesome.
Yeah. So we're pretty much pay out of pocket because we want to take some of the private healthcare insurers in the UK, but it's not that simple for centres or clinics to, at least from what I've experienced so far, to join. It's good for individual practitioners. So we're having a bit of a tough time there. So, so we started, it's called the Integrative Centre for OCD Therapy, a bit of a mouthful. Integrative is a very popular term among therapy in the UK. My degree was integrative counselling for psychotherapy, counselling and psychotherapy for children and young people, the longest degree title ever. So in the UK, we're big on integration. So I'll use CBT and obviously ACT. I'll bring in compassion-focused therapy. I'll dabble in functional analytic psychotherapy, which is technically a third wave CBT, I think. But it's much more about the relationship and the dynamic in the relationship. So it's quite interesting. So that's something I'm learning more of. And then I'll also think sort of psychodynamically a bit and use sound play and stuff like that. So all we ask our therapists, so we have a team of about 14. They're all kind of part-time, so they do differing hours. We have about 5 now that will work with kids and teens.
Wow. Awesome.
Yeah, so some of us are online, some of us are in person. And we ask our associate therapists to obviously do ERP and be experienced in it, do ACT. And then the next one is kind of CFT, and we're kind of training them more in that. But then we want them to bring their other skills and expertise they learn. So when we recruit therapists, we wanted good therapists as opposed to ERP specialists. Some we've trained, some came with expertise in ERP already, which was an added bonus. But we want everyone to bring their own unique skill set. We were more looking for the type of people they were. Where I used to work in private practice, the lady that ran that, she said to me, we only hire based on who I would send my family to. And I really like that approach. So when we first meet them, do I feel comfortable with them? Are they easy to get on with? Because then I know they're going to get on with the clients and they're going to be good with the clients. And then the technical stuff, if they don't have it, we can teach it, but most of them have had it. And then we try and create a real team atmosphere and lots of trainings. We get guest speakers in on different topics to come and speak to them every couple months. Obviously group supervisions, all of that. Yeah, so it's been really good. It's been seeing clients for just over a year and a bit now. It's been wonderful. Yeah, really happy with how it's gone, and I'm glad that we're providing the UK with something. We've tried to keep the costs as low as possible, paying our therapists a livable amount. The centre actually takes a small portion compared to most clinics we know of in the UK, not just OCD, just general private clinics in the UK, which might be a poor business decision, but we just wanted to keep it as low as possible. There is one other issue. I don't know if it's relevant to your clients, but it's something that's worth sharing in the UK. So we have VAT tax, value added tax. Yeah, you have something similar in the US, I think, right?
Yeah, but not for therapy.
No, so this is the issue. So psychologists in the UK are VAT exempt. So the UK government years ago said we can't charge VAT on mental health care. For some reason, they think psychotherapy is not. Basically, we're not registered with the health care. They call it HCPC, Healthcare Professional Council, I think. So clinical psychologists are on that. Play therapists are for some reason, and I think drama therapists. But when we've protested this, they've said, "Oh, we don't think that psychotherapy puts clients at risks in the same way like psychologists might." And I'm like, we're doing the same thing pretty much, They don't understand it basically, and we've been campaigning. The downside is, for anyone in the UK that works with one of our psychotherapists, we have to add 20% tax on.
Oh my gosh, that's so annoying.
Which added, more money than we wanted to add on. We're not making any money. The clients are losing money. The government's making money. Mm-hmm. So as you can tell, I'm not really happy about it. But we're still campaigning. My governing body are campaigning. They just don't understand psychotherapy, and it's unfair and especially when the NHS is so strained that there's not enough therapists to work with people. We should be lowering the cost to get private treatment.
Yeah, you'd think they'd want to do whatever they could to reduce that stress.
Yeah. So anyone that works with one of our psychologists, because we have 4 now, we don't charge that.
Which is crazy. That is crazy. Well, I do think though, like in America, you're going to pay out of pocket for OCD therapy, because I think I hear a lot of times Canadians and British families complaining, like they can't go through the government and then they have to pay out of pocket. And I'm kind of like, we pay out of pocket too. Like our insurance doesn't. I mean, I could take my kids to a general practitioner, and I did for years, and it kept them treading water. But then when I wanted to, once SIPAC happened over in the United States and it opened up all these providers, I mean, I was like, we're going to the best, on the East Coast, and it's expensive.
Well, you guys charge more than we do, but I think that's, when I say you guys, I'm talking about Americans. But that also comes back to the cost of your education is way higher. So you have to charge more to obviously recoup that initial investment. Whereas for us, it's expensive now, but it's still cheaper than the US. To do a master's. But I would say, like, obviously, full disclosure, they sponsor my podcast, but NoCD, I think last time I spoke to them, which was 6 months ago or so, I think they had at least 40% coverage in the US on insurance now, which is amazing because pre-NoCD, it was probably less than 1% chance you were going to get OCD therapy on insurance.
Yeah, that's made a huge difference. And just more training, I mean, really, it's what they did too, is just much more training of therapists who had an interest so that they can take those therapists, train them, and then they're already on insurance panels versus a lot of us who like did our own digging and training. And then we're like, okay, we're not taking insurance because they're a hassle. And then it's a struggle. But so I will leave a link in the show notes for your practice. I've already started to, tell people about your practice. Once I find like a good practice in the UK or Australia or Canada, I'm very excited because I'm like, it's just good to send people that is going into like just this really good care. The fact that you have 14, you have a big practice already. So
we're pausing now for quite a while just to make sure that the team really gel and they're being the best they can be. But they're a good bunch, and I trust them and like them as people. So, and we will continue to educate and train them.
Yeah, and I feel like you're right. I would rather have someone who's just a naturally good therapist and then train them the skills versus someone who has the skills on paper but isn't naturally. It's a bit of a gift, I think, to be therapists. You have that ability to read people and
true.
approach them. So The other thing I want to mention before we go is that you can also do global virtual. Is that right?
Yeah, we some of our therapists won't. They don't feel comfortable or whatever, and that's fine. But I would say at least half of us, if not slightly more, will work globally. Yeah. There's the good thing about the bad thing about the UK is it's not, what's the word, licensed. As in, I'm accredited, part of the British Association of Counselling and Psychotherapy. Some of them are the British Association of Behavioural Cognitive Psychotherapy, which is the CBT accreditation. Then we got the psychologists, HCPC. They're more licensed, actually, psychologists. But the psychotherapists aren't, which means rogue sort of coaches and people can just basically say they're a therapist when they're not.
Wow.
So it's quite bad. So we're actually campaigning again to get that more licensed. But the good thing is, it means there's way less legislation. It means we can work with anyone. We don't have to worry about crossing borders or
yeah, I mean, that is a silver lining. So you can work with people in the United States?
Yeah.
All right. Anywhere.
Yeah.
Right.
My insurance covers me. It insures me wherever I am. It insures me to do the work. So I could be on a mountain and I'm still insured.
I wish we had that here. That's amazing.
Yeah. I mean, if I told them I was on a mountain doing therapy, I'm sure they would increase my premium. But the wording is I can be anywhere doing it.
That's very cool. Well, I'll definitely be sending people your way. And if anyone who's listening who is in a location where they have had a barrier to access treatment, definitely check out his practice. I will leave a link in the show notes. Hopefully we won't bombard you, but I think just having someone that is skilled and has a really solid practice and can take anyone anywhere, that's gold. So thank you for doing what you're doing and providing that. Very excited about that.
Appreciate it. Yeah, awesome. It's been fun. You're a good interviewer.
Yeah. Well, thank you for coming on. I appreciate it. Well, I hope that you found that helpful. I actually learned quite a lot in that interview. And so I will link in the show notes the NICE guidelines. It was nice.org.uk, but I will link it in the show notes as well. I'll also link the UK charities that are for OCD so that you can tap into those resources. It's great. I didn't realize that they would advocate for you or that you could reach them and they'll help you navigate the system. That's amazing. And definitely check out Stuart Ralph's practice at integrativecenterforocd.co.uk. Again, I'll leave a link in the show notes as well. If you've been struggling to find a therapist, honestly, I feel like we pay so much in the States for OCD therapy. I'm paying a fortune for my kids' practice therapy sessions. Normally, OCD therapists just aren't covered by insurance unless you go through NoCD. And NoCD does offer a lot of people who are on insurance plans because NoCD goes and negotiates with insurance companies directly and has their own training for the therapist. And so that is unique. So you can try NoCD, but a lot of times it's frustrating that our therapy is not covered by insurance. So it sounds like Integrative Center for OCD is not as expensive as the States from what he said. I didn't ask him what he charges, but it sounded like it was even more affordable than probably what we're experiencing in my house. Check them out if you are, you've been struggling and searching, integrativecenter.for-ocd.co.uk. Also check out my memoir. I was talking about that during the intro. You can check that out at socialanxietyreality.com. And I want to thank you for supporting and listening to the show. If you've been finding the show helpful, don't forget to hit a star or write a review and rate the show because those really do help other parents recognize that this is a valuable tool. I always like to end my show reading one of the reviews, if you guys have left one, to show my gratitude. So I want to thank Nanty85, who wrote Lifeline. Hi, I've been listening for a while now, but wanted to let you know what a lifeline this has been as a parent of a child with OCD and anxiety. Each episode gives me more insight on how to help him, and the tools I've gained just from listening are invaluable. Thank you for putting these out there. Well, thank you also for writing a review. I really appreciate that. And maybe if you write a review, I'll be reading yours next time. So don't forget to find the sparkle in everything you do, and I'll talk to you again next Tuesday. Take care.
Thank you for listening to the AT Parenting Survival Podcast. To get additional support raising a child with anxiety or OCD, visit Natasha's online school of on-demand classes at atparentingsurvivalschool.com.